What's up, investors? You're watching the ChainTrends Crypto Podcast. I have a very special guest with me today, Hunter Trujillo. He's the CTO of GrayBlock Power. It's a new and very interesting company. Hunter, thank you so much for joining us. Could we just start a little bit? Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into crypto.
Well, I first got into crypto from the Ethereum perspective. In January 2017, that was like my first ETH wallet. I did some mining early on. Built like a GPU mining rig, did 140 mega hashes per second with RX 480s, and those were like $200 each. I put them on a credit card. Got them from Amazon when you could, it was early on, and now I think those even go for more than And honestly, like that's one reason I'm just not a fan of Ethereum anymore. Honestly, is that as I've come to learn more about mining and its importance and its applications, GPUs are kind of like, not only are they like a terrible middle of the road solution in that, they're like, it's ASIC resistant enough to make it best to like ASIC, there's certain ASICs out there, but they're kind of not really cost competitive necessarily, or even that available. I don't know. But the issue I have with that kind of thing is it's like it's not the most efficient package for energy to money conversion. Like if you think of a miner like an S9 or an S19, as like just a really compact way to draw many kilowatts of power and then turn it into money, like when you need to. That's like a very powerful concept. It's very kind of transformational. It's Bitcoin, as far as like I see it as, is like it's sort of a way to like reduce the friction to making things more efficient and more effective use of pretty much anything. It's one of those things where like its applications are so multitude and like there's so many applications that pretty much everything's going to have to be rebuilt in some way to interface with Bitcoin. That's my opinion. But we can talk a little bit about Ethereum if you want, but because I do have a background and I worked in Web3 for a good deal. But earlier this year I started taking the orange pill, and that was actually really cool, a really cool experience. And I've kind of come on the other side of it. I'm now I would honestly, I wouldn't even qualify it. I would absolutely say I'm a big Bitcoin maximalist. But there are also certain projects where I'd be like, well, I wouldn't put my money in it, but I'm glad they're still working on that kind of project. So
okay, yeah, and I definitely do want to get into Ethereum and maybe altcoins a little bit later on. I don't want to like unpack that quite yet. I want to make this content. I want Bitcoin, Lightning, and some other things that we discussed to be the focal. And I'll get your take about Ethereum toward a little bit later. Yeah. But to unpack some of the stuff that you were just talking about, what you were just talking about was you kind of got into mining, right? You were talking about ASIC miners eventually, and the power of being able to transition energy to money. And I agree. Completely compelling, intriguing, so fascinating. What I'd like to start is some of the critics may say about Bitcoin, would say the transactions per second, the TPS is low. It's hard to build on, right? Now, this is another reason I was so excited to talk to you. I'm not a developer, so a lot of the stuff is not clear, right, for me. So I could look and I could hear somebody say, Bitcoin is very difficult to build on top of, right? Or it's clunky. I've heard people say that's clunky or whatever.
Yeah, these are like kind of common narratives I understood from, the space as well. And, it's one reason why I didn't give Bitcoin really the time of day or much attention or take it seriously for a little too long. And one thing I would say about TPS is that one of the most exciting things that's happening in the Bitcoin space is Lightning right now. Its TPS scales with the number of nodes in the network. So like if you're say making like a game and you want to add some kind of monetization aspect to it, what's interesting is that if your TPS does increase, you can add more Lightning nodes, and LND actually supports the capability to sync the same Lightning channels across multiple instances, like VMs, machines, so that you can have like multiple IPs against the same public key. And so it's almost like the same machine, just kind of load balanced across more instances, and that allows you to scale TPS as much as you care to. It becomes more cloud-like in that way, but still decentralized and on a common protocol. One criticism of Lightning was that it centralizes a little bit, and that's one way. Like, I mean, it does revolve around connecting to a node, much as kind of like Web3 systems work, where you'll connect to like a ETH RPC node and RPC API, and so but yeah, Lightning's just really powerful. It's it uses common Rust and gRPC APIs, so I wouldn't say it's that hard to build on. It's like and coming from the Rust perspective, I mean, like, Rust programmers are fearless in some ways because we just have such powerful tools available to us. So I mean, like, you can put Rust on pretty much anything. Like, I could point to anything that runs software and be like, I can make you do what I want,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, in comparison to something like Solidity or Substrate, like, is there any similarities or differences with the language Rust? To my understanding, Rust is somewhat newer language, or maybe not. It hasn't been around as long as some of the others. Can you compare it? Give some similarities, differences? What are some of the tools that you just described that a Rust developer has?
Rust, first became open source around year 2010, I think. Go predates it by a year or two, I think, and there's like maybe a couple of years, and I would say like a few Go projects are maybe a couple of years ahead of Rust projects, maybe in some part because of that, but also the Rust community took a little bit of time to mature as well. Like, Rust from 2015 onwards, or 2018 and onwards, is not like, the language itself isn't particularly different between these versions. In fact, it's designed to be a very stable language to build upon, but the community and the ecosystem evolved such a great deal between then and now, and there were some pretty important features added along the way that it's a very different language even than it was a couple of years ago, and at least like the experience of writing applications in it, and it kind of delivers on the promise of what Node.js once wanted to do, which was kind of be able to have like a common, or even Java, right? Like a common platform to build on. But Rust isn't really a platform either. It's actually like it allows you to target specific devices and specific applications for which your code is to be run on. So, it can target WebAssembly, it can target smart contracts. There's something called Sapio that is used to kind of safely write miniscript, which is one way to write the script that runs on Bitcoin blockchain. And so Sapio is Rust, and it has some really cool features, and it's worked on by Jeremy Rubin, if you heard of him. And much respect, by the way. I went to his PlebFi event in Miami, and that was really cool. It was like you had to like known, like you had to like been a dev and kind of been in the ins to really even know about the event. But it was a really cool event,
So when as you're describing that, now user interface, right, or in the APIs are gonna, we're real early, right? It's still not seamless, I would say, right?
With Lightning or
just in general, the entire space, I think it's so early and kind of fragmented.
Well, I mean, yeah, like it's like I would equate it to like the internet 1995, 1997. Like we're like it's like getting into Bitcoin now is like getting into Amazon, like investing in Amazon when people thought it was just an online bookstore.
Okay, right. Now, do you think that Rust is the language that can kind of bridge some of those gaps and make some of those interfaces friendly and easy to use?
People have said, Rust is the language for the next 40 years, in respect to, C's relevance and dominance in the programming space. I mean, anything important, was written in C or C++. And it's a venerable language, and it's gotten us really far, and it's done really good stuff. But there is one reason why Rust is the only other language other than C allowed anywhere near the Linux kernel. So it's like it's a very capable language for anywhere you care to put it. It's not perfect. There's still like optimizations to be made here and there. But of course, like with Rust, you have so many tools to optimize that you're like, well, you can optimize as much as you want. It's as much as you care to. It's really a neat experience. Honestly, you feel like you're working with the compiler. Like you have like a compiler buddy who's like, no, you can actually do this a little better here, or no, that's actually not going to work. It's neat.
Yes. So there's, that's something to be excited about going forward. Now for a beginner, let's say I don't know much about Bitcoin. Let's just say I want to get into crypto. I want to try to figure this out. Hunter, what is the Lightning Network? Like what is this?
Well, one way to explain it is like directional money channels, payment channels, right? Like they have a channel between nodes will kind of have a balance of payments. Like it'll kind of know what payments are owed to specific nodes for what reasons, and but it's like one thing to conceptualize or kind of ask yourself a question about is like who runs a node, right? Like because like one issue with running Lightning nodes, especially right now, is it's not the easiest thing to do. And also keeping your channels balanced and stuff. And honestly, like there's some things that still mystify me about it. But that said, like there are ways to really dive in that I still have yet to do in terms of like the Plebnet or Ring of Fire type stuff I've been wanting to get into, but I just haven't had the time. Like a big part of it is because it's a directional money channel, right? Like it's outbound liquidity, or there's inbound liquidity. It's a little bit more difficult to reason about or think about. Sometimes it kind of like takes you a minute to like really conceptualize what you're trying to do, what you're doing. And it's one of those things that I think in the future it'll be more for like banks to use. I think banks will get a lot of mileage out of that. I think you know how like there's a lot of online banks these days, like just like banks you can sign up online for and get a checking account.
Yeah,
And
Chime, whatever,
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I feel like that so that's going to be a similar thing in the Lightning world eventually. As we start seeing more on ramps and the fiat and stuff, hopefully, it's just going to be one of those things where like we wish we had something like Chivo here. Like maybe more integrated with financial systems and stuff. I mean, that was kind of like always kind of the goal. How funny, right? Like it was like it
Yeah.
should just be a settlement layer between banks and like
Right.
and there's like I think good reasons for having a desire for some forms of centralization, but as long as it's the even playing field, right? Like Bitcoin is always about the even playing field. Like you can run a Lightning node if you want to. You can run a Bitcoin node if you want to. You can I mean, your sats are the same sats everybody else uses. So generally, I mean, there's certain limits to privacy and that sort of thing. But at least those are the talking points. There's actually people doing really good work on CoinJoin too. Still, those still too. But and also Bitcoin. Some really exciting things are coming down. Coming down the fork or the soft fork soon. Taproot, right?
Taproot upgrade. Yep, that's right. Hey, now let me ask you this, and I'm curious. What's it? You talked a little bit about like ASIC miners earlier on in the video. What is the most fundamental difference between a Bitcoin node and a Lightning node? Is it a different thing? And what is the difference? Like, how do I?
Technically, Lightning is chain agnostic. It can be used, on many different chains. There's Litecoin. There's an assumption of fungibility. That like what you're transferring is fungible across the network and can't be really double spent. And so again, it's like a directional money channel, and you have states that you maintain with your peers, and your peers will do those with their peers and you, and so then you can kind of form networks, and it's like a graph data structure. And one thing to know about the graph data structures is that they can scale to high amount, form a lot of connections and pathways, or between just how would I say, you can have like thousands of nodes and maintain just dozens of connections, and you can reach tens of thousands of nodes like pretty much anywhere in the graph just through a few hops. Like maybe I think the average like distance between when somebody pays for something on Lightning and then where it goes is eight hops as far as I know. So like it'll go between eight different nodes, and they all have their own capability for transactions per second. If you want to think about it that way, I think running on a Raspberry Pi, you'd be lucky to get 100 TPS, but running on a cloud VPS, some a bit more powerful, I've heard people get nearer to 1,000 TPS on a node. And if you were running bare metal, you probably get even more. So.
Okay, and that's where and what can that number potentially get to when we're talking about transactions per second? Can Lightning bring Bitcoin to what Visa does or what MasterCard does potentially?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like the larger it grows, the more it can scale, and you can, as I said earlier, you can kind of even maintain the same state channels across multiple instances using a distributed data store called etcd. And so it's there's certainly consistency constraints. There's etcd is has its own complex implementation complexities with how it might process the data Trying to think of a simple way to explain it. But that said, like these NCD is in particular is designed. I think it was by Facebook or something. They do some interesting stuff on like performance, and this maybe that was a level D. I'm actually not 100% sure, but NCD is just designed to be very fast, and so I haven't I don't have any benchmarks on what that kind of arrangement might look like, especially like if it's over Tor or over IP or over ClearNet. But there's I think the fundamental limiting factor of Lightning is just going to be how many nodes there are, and if you need more TPS, you add more nodes.
Now, is there an incentive to run a Lightning node? Like if I run my Bitcoin node, I'm I'm verifying transactions. In return, I earn a little bit of Bitcoin.
No,
no?
You actually don't get paid to run Bitcoin nodes. I think that Ethereum has a thing for that now, like with EIP 1559. But that said, like running a Ethereum node is a much different it's ball game. Like, I mean, Geth will like fall over if you look at it wrong. Like it's if you build your system correctly, you might be able to get it to be more stable and be able to support more transactions. But I mean, if somebody wanted to run a Watchtower node for ETH2 staking on a Raspberry Pi, and they realized they actually needed two. They couldn't run it both Geth and Watchtower on the same node. They needed separate nodes
with an ASIC miner too, like with a graphics card. Like what they need to run two.
To be clear, you can process and validate transactions in exclusion to mining.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like when you're running a node, you're not like mining is a completely different aspect of
right. Okay.
And any blockchain really.
Okay, so what is the why would I run a Lightning node? What would would the
it's like if you had ownership, you had the capability to run your own bank. Like if you had if you could have a bank in your back office, where like it had all the things you needed to make payments and do accounting and just have all, I mean, honestly, banks have pretty simple, roles. And actually, I even think that it's possible to do stuff like loans on Lightning because, you could probably I'm not saying this is a good idea, especially with Bitcoin being as, volatile. Yeah, it's volatile. Because of the inelasticity of supply, more cannot be made when there's more demand. So naturally, there's going to be more volatility as transactions are impinging across this impenetrable wall of how much Bitcoin there actually is on exchanges. It's kind of a beautiful thing. But
yes.
What was I going to say? But eventually that volatility will decrease. We do believe, with mass adoption, we're going to see, it become more capable and more resilient. As we see, the market cap grow and more adoption. It's really exciting time to be in it. People will probably start really looking at Bitcoin seriously next year for a couple of reasons. One is, of course, the high price. They'll be like, whoa, wow, I didn't realize, it did that. But then there's also, I think mining is going to be a really important topic in public discourse next year. And, one of my hopes is that it can be used to make the power grid more resilient by kind of increasing the depth of the energy market. That you just have more margins, more overhead, like breathing room in case things go wrong when there's power spikes, you can kind of say, like if the energy market is willing to pay more than the hash price, right? Like if they're willing to make the miners worth their time, if they have the capability to produce their own power, then they should be able to sell it to the grid and be able to make more sustainable profits, especially as halvings occur, right? Like what's really interesting is that if we start working with a grid that is kind of like there's like I would say like a somewhat artificial amount of like additional usage that could be scaled back if necessary if you're willing to pay more, make it worth their time. Then we have this like kind of overhead and or like margin is a better way to put it, and because it's not like permanent, right? And it's not like they're tolerant of intermittent consumption, as Harry Sudek put it in his interview with Peter McCormick. But what was I going to say? Yeah, but what's interesting is that as halvings occur, it kind of sets like it'll set a ceiling on energy production, like energy costs. It could help drive down the price of electricity, kind of support and make renewable energy more green energy, just more I would say just less risky, less volatility, especially if there's like a market and like a real-time energy market behind it. That's something that's not manipulated by the state. Like you need like actual market signals, because I mean energy is another one of those things like Bitcoin. It can't be faked, right? Like you can't have paper Bitcoin, right? Well, there's no like paper watts either. You can't just print watts,
Right.
So it's like one of those like fundamental limiting factors on an economy. Like if an economy's capability to source energy shrinks, then it also shrinks. We're seeing that in Europe right now. Like Russia's kind of they're a growing economy. Lynn Alden made the observation the other couple of days ago, maybe last week. She was like, like what's interesting is that the Russian stock market has gone up kind of about the same amount as the S&P 500 over the past decade. And so like when you have a growing economy like Russia's, they can source a certain amount of energy and they export it, right? Because they're an exporter, it's energy rich, it's good times, right? But as their economy grows, they're going to need more energy, and they'll export less and less over time. And right. So then the people reliant on their exports are going to have to either pay more or just use less. And what's interesting is, and now like I mean, gas prices over there is like 6 times what it used to be, I guess. And
I think this is a good time. I wanted to. You just recently joined GrayBlock Power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As the CTO, as the Chief Technological Officer. Now, what you're talking about, with Bitcoin, renewable energy, I'm not that familiar with the project. So can you tell me a little bit about GrayBlock? What its initiative is? How you got mixed up and joined that team?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. They reached out to me while I was working at ChainSafe on the Filecoin project, and I was like, I'm working on this. I really just wasn't able to give them much of my time, but the CEO is really nice, and we kept conversations up over time, and I was let go from the Filecoin project maybe a couple of months ago, and he reached out at a particularly opportune time, and I was like, all right. Well, this I'm already pretty passionate about energy and Bitcoin, and he actually the minute I told him that I was a Bitcoin maximalist, his eyes lit up. He was like, "Oh, you know what? we have customers and clients who are really they're clamoring for like a non-shitcoin solution. You know, in my words, he wouldn't say that. But yeah, so yeah, it's basically really unique and interesting opportunity. Kind of.
What is the?
Say, it's not a beaten path, right? Like a lot. Like one thing that Ethereum developers have is a lot of prior art, like existing projects that they can fork and reference, and people talking about building applications on that network, and the similar does not quite really fully exist on the Bitcoin side, but it's growing and it's getting there. And I think that we're going to be able to realize the observation that Seyfuddin Ammous made in the Bitcoin Standard, one of the later chapters, I think 11 or 10 or 11 or something like that. He was like. You don't really necessarily need a blockchain if you're not handling money, or at least if there's things happening on the blockchain that aren't money related. And so, really, if you just combine a fancy database with, money transfers, then you can kind of approximate what blockchains do and do so more efficiently in those cases. I think the issue that Ethereum kind of it has a unique approach to, and honestly, I think it could be really problematic. Is the concept of like decentralized finance, and you've got these permissionless smart contracts. It's that is a regulatory hazard. If you can't restrict who can invest in something, if you can't give them permission, essentially, right? Like then that if you see that thing as a security, that could be a very big problem. And that's kind of like an existential risk to any project built on Ethereum, and including Ethereum itself. I mean, people will say it wasn't like the SEC like maybe said. It's actually when I looked into it, I actually didn't read those comments in the same way. I think that the SEC is probably just taking their time to go after lower hanging fruit, Ripple or just variety, like really absolutely that these are scams, like Tether, just weird shady stuff, right? Like,
Tether specifically, right? Tether is very shady.
Yeah. So
no, there's certainly some questionable projects out there, 100%.
Yeah, and SEC is going to have an easier time with that. With Ethereum, there are certain cases to be made. I think that it might not have a centralized leadership, but I will also say that with the 72 million ETH that were pre-mined, right? At its initial launch, people say it was like 70% pre-mined. That's not the case. It was 100% pre-mined at launch, and so
good point. At launch, it was 100% pre-mined.
Right. Right. So when you think of it like that, I mean, they kind of gave initial token share to early on founders, investors, that sort of thing, and I mean that's a lot of money, and like you kind of wonder, like with Vitalik's continuing involvement in the project, and his considerable wealth gotten from it, I do kind of wonder if that does actually like it satisfy the conditions of the Howey test. And I mean, like on paper, like it seems the case. So like even though there might be some indications from regulators that it might not be regulated, at least here in the US, that doesn't mean necessarily everywhere in the world. And also political administrations change. administrators change, I just see it as an existential threat to the entire concept. Whereas, Gary Gensler has made some particularly salient comments on Bitcoin, in that he, sees it as more of a commodity like gold. No one person benefits from its development or investment in it. Thank you, Satoshi. That is so cool.
Yes.
Brilliant,
Yes.
brilliant. And
100%.
so, it basically, it just makes it like it's this resource, it's this digital resource that, is incorruptible. Like it is ubiquitous, it is undeniable to certain degrees. It's really a very powerful force, and I think it's safe. I mean, from the research I've done, I think it's very safe to say that it'll probably replace all money, including Ethereum.
I'm not going to say I disagree with that. I'm like 80% Bitcoin, like everything. Like everything I own is 80% Bitcoin.
I mean, I'm the least diversified investor.
yeah. So I'm not going to sit here and make and argue ETH versus Bitcoin, because that's not. Yeah. That's not the battle, right? Like,
well, you think so? They've said this, but then Vitalik is like ultrasound money, and I'm like, well, wait.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay.
Yeah. I think that was like that's a marketing thing. It was a meme.
But I mean, it comes from the horse's mouth, right? And so, like, sure. I gotta say, like, I mean, those are shots fired, and like that I think is something that is important to address. And
I think it's important to note too, and I think Vitalik has openly talked about it. I've heard him say it several times, that the Ethereum Foundation, he's the CEO of the Ethereum Foundation, they hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So they hold a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So I don't necessarily.
I mean, initially that they took Bitcoin in their ICO.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if he wouldn't have to hold it. Like if he wasn't, he knows what it is. But
I mean, arguably much of the value that is currently in Ethereum is, comes from Bitcoin's capability to store value. It is, Ethereum is kind of like it's a highly correlated asset. And the only time it really wasn't was during the ICO boom of 2017. And, but like aside from that, I mean, it's like, it just follows the line,
Sure. I mean, it's literally bonded by its liquidity, and a lot of the, I mean, it's going to continue to be correlated. But what I don't think is I know it seems like it right now, but Ethereum being, money, and it's like they're competing as money, but like I view it as like, Ethereum has some pretty cool software on there. Now, I don't know that any of them can be money in the long term, right? But as far as what could be done and what is possible with Web3, and Ethereum isn't even my favorite decentralized protocol. It's not even my second favorite, I should say. Bitcoin's would be my favorite. I'm more fascinated what could be done with something like Polkadot,
well,
personally.
The thing about these, altcoins, shitcoins is they are solving niche problems, smaller problems, right? Like Bitcoin is solving the biggest problem I can really imagine. It's like all of money, right? Like I call that the quadrillion-dollar problem. Like there's $quadrillion of assets out there, and basically Bitcoin seeks to denominate those in Satoshis. And it's going to be 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis and $1 quadrillion. It's kind of maps, right?
100%. And I agree with you. And I don't think that you're not going to get at least me to debate you on that. So we're 100% on the same page there.
Right. So basically what I'm saying is that, whatever these little projects are doing, like I'm not really thinking much about them, because I don't like to waste my time. Like I don't want to waste my time on,
I hear you. I wouldn't go as far to say little though, because like there's something like if you just look around the world, right, there's division, right, everywhere you look, right. A lot of that is because of the news and media, right. We hear two different stories. What's true, what's false, then the public fights, right. we don't even know, and a lot of the crap is fake. It's fake news or BS headlines or whatever.
Yeah.
So when I see something like the Associated Press integrating Chainlink, I can't call that a small problem. I think that's a pretty big problem to solve for humanity, you know? And that has nothing to do with money. That has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It's just a decentralized protocol in a way to verify that news is valid. Now, it's totally different than you know what I mean? It has nothing to do with Bitcoin or money, but it does improve the world, you know? So I can't say I hate all of them or that all of them are shit coins. Most of them are. Most of them will be weeded out, eaten, taken over, I think.
There's certainly projects I wouldn't invest in, but I'd be happy that they, keep.
Yeah, exactly. That was a good way to put it. You said that earlier in the clip that you're happy that they're doing it, but you don't really have the interest for it. And I understand that. That's totally fine. But a lot of the maximalists, literally, and we talked about this a little bit via message, like. People be like, I'm not coming on your show because you talk about shitcoins. And I was just like, oh, okay, cool, man. Like, that's fine. That's totally fine. But I just don't get the tribalistic thing. It's like Bitcoin and Ethereum are two very different things in my mind,
I'm relatively new to the maximalism, I will admit. So I might have more patience than others,
Right.
So,
yeah.
At least at this point in time. So I try to do a little bit of outreach, right?
Sure.
Put things in perspective, kind of give people kind of the heads up, maybe they have a blind spot towards Bitcoin, that kind of thing.
Sure, but there's also maximalists too. Like I've talked to a couple of maximalists privately that own Ethereum. They don't talk about it publicly. They never tweet about it or talk about it. But I know for sure I've talked to at least two people that own Ethereum personally. Like
it's almost like since it's like highly correlated and has a lower market cap and quite a bit more volatility than Bitcoin, it's almost like
it's a gamble. It's fun. It's like speculative.
It's almost like a form of leverage, right? Like it moves more than Bitcoin does, and so if you're into that aspect of the market, then maybe it seems fun to you. But as with anything, I mean. Like either you're doing trading or you have something better to do.
yes, and that's kind of the thing. And my thinking on it too is I own a handful, like a basket. I own maybe 5 or 10 altcoins with relatively small amounts of money. But the good thing about it, or the fun part about it is, and I've seen it a few times happen, is when you're right about an altcoin. I mean, you're right; those things fly, man. Return on investment, like I've never seen in stocks or anything else.
The thing is, Bitcoin is more than just like a means to appreciate your investment. It's more than just a store of value. It's also a medium of exchange and unit of account, and it's going to be one of those things. Like it does seek to replace all money, and so. I mean, and it's supposed to be money. It's supposed to be used to purchase things. And, people be like hodlers, like, oh, I'll never spend my Bitcoin. And I'm like, God damn it. Like, that's completely missing the point. Like,
right. But it's supposed to be a peer-to-peer monetary network. And
yes, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Also to touch on it too, I agree. I'm with you. It's the most important, protocol out. It's working on the biggest problem, one that will trickle down into the world. Also personally, what it's done for my life, right? When Saifedean talks about it in the book, like lowering your time preference. I have my Bitcoin now. So in the future, I think, in my head, I'm very wealthy, right? So, I eat better, right? I exercise more. I take care of my body because I want to be here for this appreciating asset. Now, I can't say that about any other investment pretty much in the world. So Bitcoin is special. It is profound. And it's definitely, the most important, asset or crypto. I would even go say most important thing that anybody's working on in the world.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I would absolutely second that. it's really inspiring to take the orange pill, right? Like it's like there's like the black pill and the white pill. Like black pill, you're just like doom scrolling for days. You just like really down, like rip, like KMS, like what these Zoomers say. These Zoomer death cults are just like they have to be, right. Like it's like I feel like it's a Zoomer death cult because they're always talking about death. And like it's almost like an obsession or casual, like casually talking about death. It's weird. And I kind of wonder if like they came into this world with this kind of defeatist mentality because of all the problems that they're constantly seeing. And honestly, like you could take the black pill or you could take the white pill and hope that if we just put the right person in power, then they'll make everything right. And I'll be like, you put your faith in a politician, you put your trust in a politician, and they betrayed that trust. Oh my goodness, I'm so surprised. I'm so shocked,
No
like,
way.
Everybody's always so shocked, like,
right.
But then you take the orange pill and then you're like, oh wait, okay. Actually, this is an interesting perspective on the world. It doesn't really align with either side. It's not particularly pessimistic because it has a really good solution, right? It's more like calling out a problem that doesn't necessarily really make sense if you can't really even look into it and articulate it right. I mean, for example, the petrodollar system. Lynn Alden has a really good article on the fraying of the petrodollar system, and it's just really, really like. Wouldn't have been a reason that have occurred to me for why the Iraq war happened. Like people said it was over oil, and it's like kind of, but like the petrodollar theory is honestly the best theory. I've heard people call it a conspiracy theory, and it absolutely is kind of to a degree, right? Like, but you can't like trivialize every conspiracy because they have occurred.
Right. That's true. Yeah. And Alex Gladstein talks about the petrodollar. He breaks it down really, really nicely in his articles and a couple of interviews that I've seen, and how specific the United States has been in which dictators they displace, right? They don't go after all authoritarian leaders. They go after the authoritarian leaders that try to price the commodity oil in a different currency, right? Like so Saddam Hussein tried to price oil outside of the US dollar. We had a problem with that, right? Gaddafi did the same. Like, so those are the guys we went after.
Actually, there are actually are countries that are currently doing that, and that's Russia and China, that they're pricing oil in euros.
Yes, and historically, the U.S. has had a problem with that. Right.
Well, yes, but I will say that the people we've gone after haven't had nukes, so
that's true. No, very true. But I'm saying we it's not like we were just going after all authoritarian leaders, right? Like,
right.
Look at the deal.
Specific ones who are easy targets, and even make an example of it. There was a time. It makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, and the petrodollar at its inception, I mean, it's basically a deal with Saudi Arabia, right? Like, and they're very questionable in some of their stuff. So we're okay with that, but not okay with other things. And really, what it boils down to is the money.
What's really interesting is like it's actually the theory is called petrodollar recycling, and so it's actually like just basically countries doing like balance of payments, balance of trade, just funny business for like we could go into it, but it's complicated. Honestly, the best article I would recommend to read it is Lynn Alden's article on the fraying of the petrodollar, and it's also it's interesting. She also explains something called the Triffin dilemma, and that's a really good explanation for why we became the knowledge economy. Like, Clinton, he was all about this, like, we're going to transition to this knowledge economy. We're going to ship all the jobs to China. Like, he really understood the Triffin dilemma, even if he didn't know what it was.
Right.
Basically but I mean, also Clinton's really freaking smart. Like Bill, like I've seen him speak in public, really he knows economics. Like, it's the economy, stupid kind of shit, right? So,
and what are you referencing? You're referencing what, the NAFTA? Is that the NAFTA trade deal, or is that? Yeah, that's the NAFTA deal.
So sort of, but also like just our policies towards trade deals in general, trade. Because like the Triffin dilemma in particular is the fact that the nation that has the world's reserve currency needs to get more dollars out into the system. Right. And in order for that to occur, there needs to be more imports than there are exports. So exports are money coming into the country, and then like imports are we're paying for them out in the country, and it pumps dollars out into the system, and that kind of subsidizes our role in this like almost like kind of like a mercantilism 2.0 in that that there's countries that have resources and then don't really make finished goods of them and just send the raw materials elsewhere. And those are the developing nations. Those are the third world nations, right? Whereas like then the developed nations are the ones, that have finance and factories, and they're just, on the good side of that game. And it's really hard to make the jump between the two. And because, the world isn't playing by fair rules with the money.
Correct. Right. And we have, and what you're talking about, Robert Triffin was an economist in like the late 50s, mid 50s, and he pretty much had a theory that the reserve currency, like you said, and most of his predictions played out exactly, to the T. I mean, we're pretty much sitting exactly where he said we would be sitting, so it's pretty remarkable,
Yeah. I mean, well, one thing I will say is that, like, to their credit, Bitcoiners have thought a lot about money,
Yes.
Oftentimes we don't give ourselves permission to think about money. Like people just kind of, and I'm not saying, Robert Triffin was a Bitcoiner, but what I'm saying is like
he would have been.
Maybe. I mean, like there was that one Hayek quote, right? Like maybe through some sly roundabout way, we can introduce some money they can't manipulate.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, if they were around, would have been Bitcoiners from that
time. I know.
Time,
it's kind of like, like we have this really cool thing now. You were talking about all this time, and like wish you were here.
Yeah, right. Because it does. It takes like some really profound ideas from like the Austrian economics, and game theory. It's so well thought out and so important.
Well, I mean, I guess it's just our way to honor these people.
Correct. Yes, and going down the rabbit hole as well, it was humbling, at least for me. I realized pretty quickly, like, wait a minute, I don't know what money I don't know what money is. Like, I don't even know what it is.
Right.
And here I am. At the time I was like 35 years old. It's like I don't know what money is, and I'm 35 years old.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin showed me that, so it was a really, really humbling experience. It's like getting familiar with, number one, what is money? What is the financial system? How monetary networks work? How transactions are processed today. A lot of people don't even know that, right?
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly nuanced topic,
Yeah, and what's really unfortunate is that to have a chance at being able to purchase a home or have a good job, or just have a decent quality of life, and modern times, you just kind of have to have an awareness of that shit. And like that's kind of fucked up, right? Like not everybody should have to be have an education essentially in economics, like to make it. And so, the way to fix that, I think, is just replace all the money with Bitcoin, because it's an appreciating asset at that point. As the economy grows, Bitcoin becomes scarcer, and then you just need less of it. And so, So it's I mean, like it would be, imagine like if how the wealthy will oftentimes borrow against their assets. Well, they'll have like a line of credit against $1 million worth of Tesla stock, and like they can go up to collateralizations up to like 80% on that stuff, like or loan to value. I mean, and and it's like practically an open line of credit, and what's interesting is that like by doing that, then you don't really ever sell your assets, and you never realize capital gains, and you just borrow money against your own like kind of arbitrage against the dollar. And like imagine if everybody could kind of have that sort of arbitrage against the dollar in their own bank accounts. It's not like just cash sitting there wilting away. It's it's like a stock that it's like an investment, but it's also
your bank account.
It's hard to even like express what this world would be like, because the world hasn't been this way for a very long time.
Correct. Yes. And I think it just coincides as well. Like it's very obvious that we're in a digital transformation. It just makes sense that our money would be digitized, and we now have a hard asset to put at the very least the settlement layer, and replace this, helicopter money or this quantitative easing experiment that they're just diluting the dollar every single second, it seems like, right? Like, and capitalism, we should have a choice, right? Like we should choose, and the market will at least should choose the harder money. And it does, it impacts. I was reading a book called Layered Money by Nick Bhatia. He's coming up on the podcast pretty soon, and he expresses very, very well that just somebody else even holding harder money than you, it does affect. There are implications and effects to it. Well, so whether you want to deal with Bitcoin or not, like Bitcoin wants to deal with you. You know what I mean?
Right,
so,
right. I mean, that's one reason why
unavoidable
billionaires are, they're not invested in cash, right?
Right.
That's why they're billionaires. Also, there's quintillionaire, quintillion effect. There's also Tyr's law,
which says what the best money wins over time.
Yeah, the good money pushes out the bad money,
right?
And so over time, though, there's was it Say's or C's law or something like that. It was like the one where like the weakest money is the one that's most used because people don't want to spend their hard money. But then like that may be the case for a while, especially if the central banks can like pull some real good shenanigans. But there are limits to that, and there always have been.
Good point. Yeah, man. And another thing I want to go, like, just to circle back to the alts a little bit. I've used altcoins to accumulate a Bitcoin position that I previously wasn't able to. So because the assets are so correlated, like you talked about earlier, when Bitcoin goes up, the other ones go up a lot of the time too. They just go up more. Now it's not sustainable, right? Like you sell those things and you buy Bitcoin then, you know what I mean? Like, so,
helps accumulate.
Right. Help accumulate and stack the sats,
Yeah. In the long run, you're just betting against alts,
most of them. Yeah. 99.9% of them. Yes. I'm with you. And it's really just a strategy to get as much Bitcoin as I possibly can.
Yeah.
So
I mean, in a way that's like C's law in action, right? Like,
yes.
So,
but before we go, I pretty much got all the questions across. We're about to push over an hour. Before we go, do you got anything that you want to throw out there? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah. So, we actually didn't get to talk too much about, storage. That's kind of like something that decentralized storage. It's something I put a lot of time into and work into. And I mean, if you allow me to, have
please.
Yeah. Okay. So, one reason I was brought into the Filecoin project was because I had, done some work with IPFS and experimentation and kind of like investigating what would be required to make a sort of peer-to-peer web browser where, every web browser was also a web server. And so that was really interesting exercise and thought experiment. And then diving into Filecoin, it's really interesting. It is a coin or like a blockchain. It is like its own blockchain. It's incredibly complex. Like I would say, never invest in something you don't really understand, and and Filecoin is one of those things. Like I don't think it's possible for every person investing in it to really understand.
Right.
It is like two different kinds of proof of work, maybe, and then it's based on proof of stake. Like the staking is gated by proof of replication and proof of space-time, and so it's kind of and there's even like multiple blocks mined per block height increase, what they call an epoch. They call it an epoch because it can be multiple blocks. Honestly, it's like there's so many things about it that are just incredibly complex, but it's also kind of clever because it sort of uses the speculation in the asset to subsidize the cost of storage. I mean, like you can store on Filecoin, for very small amount of money, like thousands of times cheaper than Amazon S3, terabytes of data for a year, and pay like fractions of a penny, and that's powerful to some degree, but its utility is compromised a great deal by the implementation details, the specifics, which are like, one issue is to seal and unseal a sector, it takes hours. So, it's not like random access, like S3, it's not even nearline storage. It's not even that fast. It's probably even slower than Glacier, I would even say. Not even probably. Like Glacier can take minutes. This can take hours. So it doesn't really solve a lot of critical problems that people want it to solve and have been trying to use it to solve. And that's why I when I moved on or was let go, I couldn't really let go of the thing I was working on. I worked on it to begin with, and I continued thinking that through, what would be required to make peer-to-peer storage, decentralized storage. Starting to think a lot more about that now. And at that point, I was like honestly, I had trouble letting go of the job. I was just like I was really surprised, and so I just kind of I had this idea percolating in my head for a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna put my idea to paper and see if it can, or to code, to editor, whatever you want to. I'm gonna get this out, flesh it out, and that's what Forage is. Forage is on my GitHub page. I think I gave you a link to it, but it's basically storage channels, and ideally it'll eventually I'll link it up to Lightning to make paid storage channels. But right now, I basically have the capability to store data remotely and be able to validate with a reasonable amount of probability that the data is still there intact, without you needing to download an entire copy of the data and verify it locally against a hash. So you can just like upload data to a server, keep the hash, and then ask for like a random chunk of it in from the server periodically, and say like, give me like this kilobyte of data, this particular position in the file, and then it'll say like, all right, these are the bytes, and then you compare those bytes to the hash you have by a specific offset, and uses this technique called stream verification. And so it's just a really powerful way to offload data from your computer. Trust that it's still there, And that's like a way to solve for, proof of replication, right? Like, that your data is available and replicated on a network, at which point you kind of solve for what Filecoin solves with a much simpler process. And
Right.
and it could be a powerful thing. So still working on it. Released a new version last night, actually. Kind of refactored things a little bit, make it easier to test.
How long have you been working on this project?
Oh, I mean, just past couple of months.
Past couple months?
Yeah, it's I mean, ever since I left, so.
It's great, man. It sounds really fascinating. I mean, behind you too. I mean, I love the idea. It sounds exciting. On a roadmap, how like where would you say you are on a roadmap? Are we a year away, potentially more, less?
I mean, it depends how much time I allow myself to work on it. I did just join GrayBlock as their CTO. They have a lot of really pressing problems to solve. But one thing is, like, I still need to add Tor networking to it. I want to use Tor for a couple of reasons, but like a big thing I need to do before it's like really usable in the way that I want it to be, like for the 0.1 version. If it's not 0.1, please don't use it. But like basically I need to add encryption to it. And like the one problem that Filecoin certainly doesn't solve is, if you allow somebody to store data on your devices, on your hardware, permissionlessly, then that could be a problem, right? Like, what if somebody puts something really terrible on there? Right. So you need to encrypt that. And that's one reason why, when exploring like the peer-to-peer web browser idea, like if you needed storage to scale beyond what's on your local device, you can totally do that. But you still need to serve any data from like that you want to serve on your own behalf, like your own data. You still need to serve it on your own device because you can decrypt that data. You can't have that data served to others from, at least in clear text, from your node. You can maybe have like a crypto box, kind of like public-private key, like kind of like, think of like a multi-sig for encryption. Like imagine like having multiple keys capable of unsealing or decrypting a piece of information. That could be done, but that there's like a finite number of that, or you could maybe share the key, but that's another issue. But there's complexities in designing these systems, but I think they can be overcome. At which point we're going to see these kind of systems capable, the peer-to-peer sort of web systems capable of replacing a lot of what we do on the internet, on the web in particular. And so there's a big difference. Like one thing I will say after going down this rabbit hole is that the web, I don't think it was really designed for efficiency. It was designed for scale. It was designed so that big corporations, at least as it exists now, big corporations, to have sort of billions of users with some incredibly complex technology that's like more complex than it really needs to be to accomplish what we use it for. And that in that case, like one thing that Rust developers are really big on is minimizing how much data is copied at a time, because copy operations are very time consuming. Allocating the memory, copying the bytes, making sure it's all safe, like that's time consuming, and it's like a big reason why Rust pays a lot of attention to that in its design. And what's interesting is that when you're using a web browser, you have like lots of different copies of the data you're looking at. Like if you're looking at a post on Facebook, right? Like you have like a database that has that data in probably a memory index somewhere. And then it'll have that data in, a cache or something, and then it'll get onto the server. It'll get copied onto the server, and then it'll be copied onto, various different networking routers, switches, and then it'll finally get to your computer, and then there's like a copy of it in your browser's like networking stack. There's a copy in your your like HTML document. There's like a copy of the data in your GPU, and it's just like so many different copies that like wouldn't necessarily need to exist if it was just kept in one place, like just on your computer. And imagine like if you were on, if your Twitter replacement were to, kind of subscribe to your people you follow, and when they publish stuff, you just subscribe to their particular nodes. And so you actually like really don't need to run a server to run a social network this way. You just have people, join, publish, and there's subscribers that receive these things. And you can maybe have an kind of like an inbox model, like how like email works. If somebody doesn't come online for a while, you just kind of remember like, well, when they come online, we'll publish what we would have published. It's like that kind of stuff like could be used to build a web that doesn't need cloud computing or servers. And one reason why I've been kind of investigating this is not just really from a censorship perspective, it's really honestly just out of spite. Honestly, like I really hate big tech, like with a passion. Like Silicon Valley, I think of like that one warning that people were supposed to put on like toxic waste dumps, where like nothing of value is kept here. Like we were not proud of this. We were once a proud of civilization. This is like an awful place. Like I think of that like as like nothing of value is really there now. It has really worked against us in some really insipid ways. And it's hard to really explain succinctly how messed up it is. But as somebody who's like, worked in ad tech in past lives, like seeing what they do with targeted advertising, like that is a way to manipulate people. And, if you have money, you can change people's perceptions or actions based on, information that's shown directly to them. And that's kind of fucked up, right? Like that shouldn't be something that should just be a thing that people should be able to do. And but it's like somehow it seems like an acceptable compromise for these free services. So
now you see what you're talking about right now, the whole thing, like what they do with our data and how they can basically, they show you certain information to get an emotional response or keep you, here on the screen. And these predictive analytics are literally change the way people behave. And that's why part of the reason I was open to starting to look into some of the Web3 protocols for that exact reason. So, what you're talking about, if that could be a solution to basically all the rest of crypto, let's say, like everything goes away, we got Bitcoin, we got that. Yeah, that's a fine solution for me as well.
Exactly. That's kind of my point, where I'm like wondering, are the solutions that Web3 are coming up with the right way to solve that problem? Right. And so like I kind of wonder if you need money or you need like something scarce to kind of secure a system, that's one thing, right? Like you throw them some sats, you get an account, right? But when we're talking about like where the web should go, I don't think Web3, as they put it, is quite the right approach. And that's almost like one reason why I think, it's important to even distinguish between what the web is and what the internet is. Because the internet, based on TCP/IP, Internet Protocol, it's like, IP addresses are just like a way for you to route packets from your destination, or like your source to their destination. And so like, basically you can say like, and vice versa. So, just route packets over the internet to this place I wanted to go and give it to this port or something, TCP. And then, whereas the web is like, it's built on top of that. And it's kind of has this sort of centralizing effect where it adds these additional complexities and protocols to something that works just fine without, like you like Telnet and Usenet, they weren't web, right? Like they were based on the internet, but they did what we thought the web should do. And the web turned out to be really flexible. And, that is one way to do it. But even on smartphone apps, we have like lots of apps that honestly use the web when they could really actually just use the internet. And these are specific apps that are designed, for their purposes. And we don't really necessarily need to complicate it by adding all this additional like centralized complexity. I mean, like the web and net are like even good visual or like mental models of how the web is centralized. It all leads towards like the centralization, but there's kind of interconnections too. But then like the net is like it's like a mesh, and so there's a difference between like distributed and decentralized. I mean, I'm sure you've looked into Vitalik's stuff on that, but
yeah. It's really fascinating and interesting though, and I again, there's problems that need to be addressed. I don't care how they get addressed. I just hope they get addressed.
But it is something to keep in mind is that there are other ways to solve these problems than Web3. And so, if your value proposition of Ethereum hinges on, Web3 or DeFi, they're absolutely existential threats in the, probably tens of years, right? Like maybe 5 to 10 years from now, we might not see those being as relevant as they are now.
Definitely a possibility. And I agree with you. And like you said, over the long haul, the hardest money will win. And I haven't seen anything harder than Bitcoin. So that's my pick.
Honestly, I mean, I think that I mean, it's a controversial opinion. I don't think that there's really even a way to make something better than Bitcoin. But like, I mean, I'm always trying. I do believe in like intellectual honesty and say, hey, if there's something that's truly better,
sure,
that's one thing. But like, for example, like people say Monero, right? Like Monero's like it's a solution, and I'm like, Bitcoin is solving like the global financial system. Like,
right.
I don't want institutions to be like or nation states to be storing their assets in a privacy coin.
Right.
I'm
glad there's a privacy coin, right?
Sure,
but
sure.
What? Yeah, right. Like at the end of the day,
I'm glad they're still working on it.
Yeah,
but,
right. But like you said, though, is a nation going to come and start transacting in an anonymous coin? Definitely not. So that's kind of and we agree. We see eye to eye on that 100%. So
yeah. Well, I don't think there's much we do disagree on, but
yeah. We definitely don't actually, because everything you said about Ethereum, everything you said about altcoins, I'm with you 100%. I say that in my content all the time. This is very speculative stuff. This should not be like, don't put your rent money into anything like this. Like dollar cost average with Bitcoin would be the best advice that I have for anyone. But you got
like Bitcoin is one of those things where like you kind of don't really get it until you start really using it a little bit. Like just start like using little parts of it a little different. Like if you want to learn about it, you kind of have to dive in. And
yes.
Like as with most things, But I mean, like the best advice that's very good advice, DCA, or even just buy a little bit,
that's it, just a little bit, and go from there. And I think in my head, once somebody gets like this much Bitcoin in them, it's over, man. It's over.
Well, it was like what that one quote was it. I totally forget. I think it was the Satoshi quote where it was like, it couldn't hurt to get just a little bit, it might go somewhere.
Well, all right, I'm out of time. Hunter, thank you so much for joining, man. I had a great time talking to you. I learned quite a bit through this content. Mm-hmm. I'd love to have you on again sometime. Yeah. If you guys are still watching, thank you so much. Please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. There are links in the description for Hunter's LinkedIn, his Twitter, his Substack, and I'm going to add I don't have the link for the
I'll send it to you.
But I will. There will be a link in the description for Hunter's side project. As well as, do you want me to put a link for GrayBlock Works in as well?
Yeah,
definitely. And then the link will also be in the description.
Sounds
Again, it's not financial advice. Be sure to do all your own research. The purposes of this content are for education and entertainment. Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time.
good. Take care now.